The name of our lesson: the 12 tribes of Yisrael. This Shabbat, we shall delve deeply into the history of our people, the chosen people of the Most High. The 12 tribes of Yisrael. We will take a look at when our ancestors dwelt in a land of promise. 12 tribes strong. We will look at when our Hebrew Israelite kingdom was broken up into 2 kingdoms, and also when the northern kingdom of Israel went into captivity, and 10 tribes were dispersed by the hands of the Assyrians in 712 BC. And when the southern kingdom of Judah went into captivity at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 586 BC. We will take a journey through history of our people, the Israelites. We will identify some of our brethren of the northern 10 tribes and where they have been sojourning far from the land of promise that was promised unto our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we shall reveal the awesome promise of our Elohim, the Most High Yah, to deliver his chosen people from the land of their wanderings, and to bring all 12 tribes of Israel back into the promised land that Moses led our people to after our hard bondage of 430 years in the iron furnace of African Egypt. Now, to begin, you must know some of the ancient history of the tribes of Israel. Our forefather Abraham, his grandson Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. Jacob had 12 sons. Here they are, listed in order of age. Reuben, the eldest. Simeon, Levi, Judah, the 4th son. Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. But our father Jacob gave Joseph a double portion, so that each of his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, became a tribe, rather than just one tribe of Joseph. See, this was done at the time when it came to splitting up the promised land into 12 portions for each tribe. A portion for each tribe to own and dwell in. Now the tribe of Levi, they receive no contiguous. And contiguous means touching along a boundary or at a point. Like the state of Missouri touches the state of Arkansas. Imagine the Holy Land split up into 12 states. Each one of them states was owned by one of the tribes. The tribe of Levi was not allowed to own one of the 12 states. They had no contiguous land. They had no regional land like the other tribes. Instead, the Levites were given certain cities, including the city suburbs scattered about the lands of the other tribes. Let's verify this in the book of Numbers. Let's go to Numbers chapter 35, verses 1 through 8, so that y'all will get a clear understanding why Joseph received a double blessing and why his two sons were given that portion of land that the Levites couldn't own, and we'll explain why. In the book of Numbers, chapter 35, in verses 1 through 8, we read, "And Yah spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, saying, Command the children of Israel that they give unto the Levites of the inheritance of their possession cities to dwell in. And you shall give also unto the Levites suburbs for the cities round about them. And the cities shall they have to dwell in, and the suburbs of them shall be for their cattle, and for their goods, and for all their beasts. And the suburbs of the cities, which you shall give unto the Levites, shall reach from the wall of the city and outward 1,000 cubits round about. And you shall measure from without the city on the east side 2,000 cubits, and on the south side 2,000 cubits, and on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits, and the city shall be in the midst. This shall be to them the suburbs of the cities. And among the cities which you shall give unto the Levites, there shall be 6 cities for refuge, which you shall appoint for the manslayer, that he may flee thither. And to them you shall add 42 cities. So all the cities which you shall give to the Levites shall be 48 cities. Them shall you give with their suburbs. And the cities which you shall give shall be of the possession of the children of Israel. From them that have many you shall give many. But from them that have few you shall give few. Everyone shall give of his cities unto the Levites according to his inheritance which he inherited." Levi was the tribe of the priesthood that received tithes of the other tribes who each had land. Now, after the reign of Solomon, around 980 BC, the kingdom of Israel split. The 10 northern tribes rebelled against King Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, the son of David, of our tribe of Judah. Judah, along with Benjamin, were the two southern tribes that remained loyal to Rehoboam, who reigned from the capital city of Jerusalem. Like Judah, the lands of Benjamin were near Jerusalem. Now the 10 northern tribes made Jeroboam, a son of one of Solomon's servants, their king instead of Rehoboam. Well, their capital was first in Shechem, and then their capital moved to Samaria, where it was until the destruction of the kingdom of Israel by the Assyrians. And thus began the sojourning of what was to become known to the world as the 10 lost tribes. This Shabbat, we shall see some of the direct bloodline descendants of the 10 northern tribes as they await the fulfillment of prophecy of the return of the 12 tribes of Israel back into the land of promise after centuries of exile from our beloved homeland. Now, many of y'all have seen that 12 tribes map a list made by some various Hebrew camps up out of New York. But we will prove that they don't have no magical Israelite GPS devices by the mere fact that they don't list on their charts some of the very Hebrews we shall see this Shabbat. Now, most of us know that we who live here in the land of our captivity in America, or the tribe of Judah, who fulfilled the prophecies and are fulfilling the prophecies of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, and whose direct ancestors were delivered into bondage in the hulls of slave ships via the transatlantic slave trade. This Shabbat, we will seek out and search for our brethren of the other tribes of Israel. If Brother Jacob has y'all permission to proceed with this lesson, put a 77 up in here for me. Somebody, please. Let me know y'all rolling with me this Shabbat. Hallelujah. Let's begin by looking at some Hebrews dwelling in South Africa, whom the world calls the Limba. Here is a secret ancient history documentary on the Limba. We're going to watch it together, starting with the first 10 minutes. Then we're going to discuss what we see.
This week, join me as I pursue one of the world's most intriguing mysteries, the legend of the lost tribes of Israel. The Bible's Book of Kings tells us that the northern kingdom of Israel was destroyed by a brutal Assyrian invasion in the 8th century BC, and more than land was lost. 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel would vanish into history and myth. But one of these lost tribes may have survived in the unlikeliest of places. Could ancient Jews have journeyed from the Middle East to South Africa? And could these African bloodlines reach back to King Solomon and before? To find out, I'm going to trace their journey. I'll brave an Israeli war zone, fly over the African bush, and explore a 3,000-year-old battlefield and ancient cities of stone. We're digging for the truth, and we're going to extremes to do it.
They're a lot bigger than the scorpions in Utah.
Oh, don't worry, they get much bigger. Look at the one at your foot.
This is the Limpopo River, the northern border of South Africa. I've come to hear the story of a local group of people with astonishing ties to the story of the lost tribes of Israel, the Lemba.
Today, they live only a few miles away from here, but this would have been the final challenge in an epic journey across deserts, oceans, and jungles. I'm Josh Bernstein, and my goal is to follow in their footsteps to determine if this fascinating story could possibly be true.
Today, the Lemba are mainly concentrated in the shadow of the Soutpansberg Mountains in the far north of South Africa. To the casual observer, they look and live much like any other traditional Southern African community. But if you scratch below the surface, there are some intriguing differences.
Here I am in South Africa, and there are these men wearing skull caps and talit, shoulder wraps. You would see this in any synagogue in America or Israel, but I never thought I'd see it here in South Africa.
I want to find out how these people seem to have Jewish customs. Samuel Moeti is president of the Lemba Cultural Association.
Pleasure.
So, I'll be honest, I came into this village and the first word I heard was shalom,
Yes.
a Hebrew word.
Yes.
How's that possible? How is it that the Lemba are speaking Hebrew?
The Lembas are the original Hebrews, and they were scattered, as you know, and they crossed into Africa. So they were scattered all over. So in South Africa, in many parts of South Africa, you find the Lembas who are actually Hebrews.
Hebrew. So the Lembas claim to be descendants of ancient Israelites?
Not claim, they are.
They are.
They are.
Okay.
We are the original African Hebrew. We are scattered all over.
Can you give me a few examples of some of the Jewish
Yes, we don't partake of pork.
Okay.
We don't mix milk with meat.
It sounds to me like the Lemba have a unique culture surrounded by others who do not practice the same way.
That is correct. We always believe that the Jewish people who live all over the world are our brothers because we come from the same root.
Could it be that the Lemba are a lost tribe of Israel? To answer the question, I have to turn the clock back some 2,700 years, to the time of the mighty Assyrians. Back then, Assyria was the greatest imperial power the world had ever seen. And it had set its expansionist sights on the northern kingdom of Israel. The northern kingdom, composed of 10 tribal groups, was completely destroyed. Any surviving Israelites were enslaved and taken to Assyria, what is now the nation-states of Iraq and Syria. Little is known about the fate of these lost tribes, but for 2,700 years, hope remained. Could the Israelites have regrouped? Could some have escaped their captors and fled? Could a group of wandering Israelites have survived the elements and continued on, faithful in some land far from home? Jerusalem. There's no place more associated with the Jewish people. But as I walk through its narrow streets, I can't help but appreciate how deeply connected the people of many faiths feel to this city, and how millions of people around the world have a connection to this place, including me. My father was born here, and I probably have ancestors who were here when the Assyrians broke up this land. One of my relatives has told me that my grandparents are buried in this very graveyard on the Mount of Olives. I've never visited their graves before, but I've decided to try and find them.
So after 10 minutes of wandering, I found them. So this is my grandmother. This is my grandfather. This is my great-grandmother. My great-grandfather. This actually means something to me. There's a connection for me that speaks to what the significance of heritage is. And for the Lemba, I understand why they might be interested in claiming some historical identity with Jerusalem. This is only 2 generations ago. For them, it's thousands of generations.
People have claimed to have found lost tribes all over the world, from Siberia to Australia. Some of the first Europeans to land in the Americas assumed the natives were lost tribes, and even tried to communicate with them in Hebrew. Historian Hillel Hulkin has written a book about the lost tribes, and thinks that they could still exist today.
Hillel, why are you so passionate about the lost tribes of Israel?
The lost tribe myth really is, through Jewish eyes, among other things, a story of tough Jews, living still like the Jews' biblical ancestors, independent, warrior-like, fearless, all the things that Jews in the diaspora over the ages generally were not.
Was this the first Jewish diaspora then?
Yes. So we have some archaeological evidence, besides Syrian inscriptions, to show that these Israelites were deported to various parts of the Assyrian Empire. But after that, they disappear from history.
What's the big deal with being a lost tribe? What is the attraction for these people to claim, I was one of the lost tribes of Israel?
Well, the big deal, you have to understand, is not so much that people are claiming to be lost tribes, but the fact that the Christian and the Jewish world have been looking for hundreds or even thousands of years for the lost tribe. It's the search for the lost tribes that is really the historically fascinating phenomenon.
By now, the trail left by the lost tribes has gone cold. But perhaps the Lemba's oral history, handed down over the generations, can help us make a connection to the lost tribes of Israel. The Lemba's story goes like this. Thousands of years ago, they were forced out of Israel and settled in a place called Senna, which is believed to be the present-day Yemen. There, they lived as traders and craftsmen until war or natural disaster pushed them across the Red Sea and into Africa. Then began a slow migration south. Along the way, according to the Lemba, they built great stone cities. It's a claim that's fascinated archaeologists. Why? Because the ruins of ancient stone cities still exist in southern Africa today. It's also where I need to be exploring next.
I had no idea how big this site was.
I'm on the trail of an African tribe, the Lemba. They claim ancient Israelite ancestry and could just be one of the lost tribes of Israel.
We are original Hebrew.
Their oral traditions speak of a great journey through Africa and of the great stone cities that they left along the way. I'm on my way to see one now.
The city of stone I'm going to is called Machema, and it's only a few kilometers down this road.
Not many people know about this place. In fact, it's hidden on a huge cattle ranch, and I've had to get special permission to explore it. It's very rarely visited, even by archaeologists. I'm hoping it still has some clues to the Lemba's story.
Michael?
Hello.
Hello. How about in?
In this first part of this documentary, we see this Khazar adventurer from the History Channel, Josh Bernstein, who said he's going on a journey from Israel down to South Africa, digging for the truth of these black Hebrews who are direct descendants of one of the 10 lost tribes. He go down there and he asks one of the brothers who speak good English that you could understand, how do they have Hebrew customs? The first word I heard was shalom. How the Lemba speak in Hebrew? Brother looked at him and said, we the original Hebrews. Same answer we would give. If y'all agree with that, put a 7 up in her. And this Edomite tried to put the brother on the spot by saying, y'all claim to be Hebrew. He said, no, we are Hebrew. Hurry up and put a check, some chin checkers on that. The brother told him, we keep the dietary laws. We know who we are. So this Khazar adventurer say he got to turn back the clock 2,700 years. Let's go all the way back to the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel by the Assyrians. And they showed the map of these Hebrews' journey from the time of the fall of the 10 tribes who were up north, whose capital was in Samaria, and they went into captivity by the Assyrians, all the way to where they're at right now in South Africa. So this heathen say, I got to go to Jerusalem and try to get me some answers. Now he said that his daddy was born in Jerusalem, and he visited a site where his grandmother and grandfather and great-grandmother and great-grandfather, they must have been in on the taking of the land in 1948 via the Balfour Declaration. So they ain't been there but since 1948. When the Khazars took over the land. But did y'all catch the lie when he said some of my ancestors could have been in that northern kingdom that was taken captive by the Assyrians? Use a damn lie. Because you Khazars, who are converts to Judaism and don't have a drop of the blood of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in your veins, didn't set foot in that land collectively until 1948. If y'all understand that, put a 77 up in her. Please. For we need understanding to go forth. Todah Rabbah, moving right along. He went up to an Edomite writer in Jerusalem who basically says, well, the 10 lost tribes are lost, and the world fascinated by trying to find them, but we just need to leave them lost. Y'all know why he's saying that, right? Because he knows that they are all black. Just like the tribe of Judah, us is considered quote unquote black. That's why the Khazar writer, who's supposed to be such an expert on the 10 lost tribes, summed it up by saying, they lost, just leave them lost. No, we ain't trying to hear that. Now, he also admitted that the Lemba have an oral history that goes all the way back to the time of the destruction of the northern kingdom in 2,700 years ago. An oral history that has been passed down from generation to generation to the generation that we are bearing witness to this Shabbat. And once again, we saw one of the elders of the camp saying crystal clear English, we are original Hebrews. Let's continue.
How about in?
To help me make sense of it, I've asked historian Dr. Magda LaRue to come with me to the site. She's been studying the Lemba for years and has just published a book on the similarities between their social customs and those of the Old Testament Israelites.
So Magda, there are specific parallels between the religious practices of the Lemba today and the religious practices of ancient Israelites.
Definitely. They've got remnants of an ancient type of Israelite religion. So in a way, they conserve this very special ancient type of
It's like old school religion.
Yes.
But how do they maintain that religious identity? How did they keep it intact for so many years when there was this long journey from Israel down to South Africa?
You see, that's a question. I think it's by means of their oral traditions. But they kept themselves separate from other groups. They lived with other peoples, moving with them, migrated southwards. Oh, that is one of their salient characteristics, is that they keep up their culture. They just live it. You know,
Is this cultural resilience the key to the Lemba's survival during their epic journey across 4,000 miles of land and sea? And could there still be any physical evidence here at Machima which supports the Lemba's claim to having made the journey? This once thriving settlement is now easy to miss, so we've asked one of the farm workers to take us to the site. Waiting for us at the top is archaeologist Richard Wade. He believes he's found some material evidence which links this site with both Yemen and Zimbabwe, two of the places the Lembas say they traveled through.
Come and have a look at these amazing things here. There's a potter's weaving weight.
A potter's weaving weight.
Saw this thing. It's the form of a spinning jenny, and this, of course, is found in Yemen. But basically, this, apart from that, look what else. This is an amazing, I would say, not decoration, but inscription. I've seen this before. You make out some sort of a letter, followed by a dot, followed by another letter, followed by another sort of a letter, and a dot, and another letter. Or is it just decoration?
Yeah.
But the problem is we find this in Yemen.
This,
No.
you just found this, correct?
Yeah, it was lying.
It's just
right
sitting
there.
here?
Yeah, there's another.
And
few
this-
potsherds here. Just
This tells
potsherds.
you what?
Well, this is a weaver. There was weaving done here. There was cotton grown. There was something with the trade. And the only people who do that are basically mentioned by the oral traditions of the Basena people or the Lemba.
So this says the Lemba were not just living here; they were actually they had a big enough community that they were weaving.
Yes, this is like a castle with almost a little kingdom, possibly.
Richard believes the Lemba of Machima shared more than ancient technologies with the Israelites of Yemen. They shared the same culture.
The inscription that's written into that wall is significant because it ties this place with other Lemba communities.
I would say so.
Cylindrical tower.
It seems both experts are convinced this place is definitely the work of ancient Lemba communities.
The question that I'm wondering is that this is a significant amount of work. Is there anything physically, archaeologically, that was found here that connects the Lemba with other places that they claim to have traveled through?
Yes, there are amazing collections of beads which are found here and are found in Zimbabwe, but it's a specific collection of beads. I'm not talking just about one or two of them. And these beads are directly related to Tarim and Sayut, where the harbors are of the Sena people, originally coming through from Yemen. But nowhere else.
So these beads, just take a look at them real quick, reinforce the Lemba's claim
Very much.
that they did indeed travel from Israel into Yemen and then south through Africa. This is actually the first physical proof I've gotten of the people here coming from someplace to the north. And the Lemba today claim this as their heritage.
Then it is.
The most intriguing feature at the Machima site is the remains of a mysterious conical tower, which still has archaeologists scratching their heads.
But I'm not really clear what it was used for.
Nobody really could tell you unless they lived there. But is it a lookout tower? No, it's too low for the rest. You would have your lookout tower higher there. So we have a very significant, well-made little conical tower, which is very much the only one I've ever seen south of Zimbabwe.
Really?
Oh, yes. Zimbabwe's great enclosure has got the large one. There's quite a few there. There's a small one, but this is not seen in South Africa.
A Zimbabwe connection is interesting because that's one of the places the Lemba say they traveled through.
And these are the Lemba.
Then this was built by the same people who built the one in Zimbabwe?
Definitely the same people. The same stonework is here, the same bead types, the same weaving technology.
Richard lays out some convincing evidence that the Lemba did indeed build this place, and could also have built the largest ancient stone city in sub-Saharan Africa, where I'm heading next. The ruins of Great Zimbabwe.
It might be a bit of a long shot, but it's definitely worth a closer look.
It's a really long drive, so I'm going to catch a ride with a local pilot. This will also give me a chance to see what the Lemba would have been up against on their long trek through the African bush. By the time I find out that this little plane isn't stable on windy days, it's too late.
And we're off.
Feel that wind pushing us?
Yeah, is that good or bad?
Yeah, nah, it's not bad, but
Okay.
we've got it.
Yeah.
My pilot, Steve Scott, assures me we'll be fine.
This is the Limpopo riverbed here?
Limpopo, and that's Zimbabwe over there.
This is Zimbabwe right
That's
there.
Zimbabwe.
And South Africa's right here.
Yeah.
Wow, this is stunning. According to the Lemba, this was the final obstacle they faced on their journey from Israel to South Africa, the Limpopo River.
It's the dry season now, but it's still full of crocodiles, just one of the wild animals anyone trying to cross this land on foot has to steer clear of. And there would have been a lot more of them back when the Lembas say they made their journey.
So we've just landed in Zimbabwe, and by just landed I mean we got here hours and hours ago, but we spent the better part of the afternoon getting our press credentials. It is not easy getting these at this time. We've been allowed because our story is on Great Zimbabwe, which is a point of national pride. The whole country was named after this site I'm going to.
Great Zimbabwe is in the south of the country, a 5-hour drive from the capital, Harare.
Oh, local craft. I've come to buy everything.
I wasn't sure what to expect.
How much for the chest set? $120. 30,000. Keep in mind that $1 US is currently 6,000.
This country used to be one of the most successful in Africa, with a huge tourism industry. But government policy has driven most tourists away.
Very much. Bye. Thank you.
Life's not much different in Masvengo, the town nearest to Great Zimbabwe, the ancient city the Lemba claim to have built.
And tomorrow I'll find out if their claim is true.
And I'll get my hands dirty learning how they built it.
All right. I have made fire.
I'm on the trail of an amazing group of people who now live in southern Africa, but claim to have made an epic journey to get there.
So the Lembas claim to be descendants of ancient Israelites?
Not claim.
They are.
They are.
I've learned that 2,700 years ago, the Assyrian Empire scattered the population of the northern kingdom of ancient Israel, creating the so-called lost tribes of Israel. The Lemba story is that they settled in Yemen before crossing the Red Sea and traveling inland through Africa, where they built great cities of stone. I've seen evidence of one they built near their current home in South Africa. Now, I'm backtracking their journey to explore a structure they claim to have built centuries earlier, and which could be their greatest legacy, Great Zimbabwe. It's been a long journey getting here, but I couldn't miss the chance of seeing the sunrise. And as more of this place appears out of the dawn mist, I begin to get an idea of its scale. The site covers an area of 4 square miles, the largest ancient stone city in sub-Saharan Africa. As I walk around, I can imagine this place as a bustling community, the hub of an empire that ruled over a vast area of southern Africa, a center for trade from far and wide. The Zimbabweans are very proud of it, and who can blame them? I'm here to meet Dr. Edward Matenga, the site's curator and an expert on the history of Great Zimbabwe.
Wow. So this whole area was a city that ruled the kingdom.
Yes, the first buildings were laid on the hill, and then it extended into the valley.
You know, I saw parts of those buildings coming up here, but I had no idea how big this site was.
In the background, we've got the biggest building, which is the Great Enclosure.
The Great Enclosure is that big circular one.
Yes.
Wow. What was this place for?
This is the Great Enclosure.
Yeah?
It was built for the paramount wife of the king.
For the first wife of the king?
Yes.
So
Edward tells me that the Great Enclosure was the last structure at the site to be built, around 1400 AD. What I really want to see is the conical tower that Richard Wade says is the same as the one we saw at Machima.
It's called the Conical Tower.
Conical Tower. What was it used for?
Your guess is as good as mine. It wasn't used for anything other than being a sort of a ceremonial monument.
Really? Is there an entrance? A door?
No.
So I don't get it, it's just a big cone of rock.
Yeah, it's all sort of it's pegged in stones, and there's no entrance.
As Richard Wade told me, no one knows for sure what these towers were for. But the fact that both Machima and Great Zimbabwe have them supports the claim that the same people were involved in building both sites. Which brings me to the big question.
Edward, who built this place?
This site was built by ancestral Shona communities. The Shona today are the predominant inhabitants of Zimbabwe. They are a segment of the Bantu.
Edward believes that it's his ancestors, the Shona, who built this place. So where does that leave the Lemba?
So this entire community was built by the Shona?
Yes, sir. This is the only site, as I told you. There are about 300 sites.
Historian Magda LaRue told me that the Lemba lived and worked alongside other communities while maintaining their own identity and culture. So it's still possible that the Lemba were involved in this place's construction. And since this type of architecture was unique in Africa at the time, maybe it was the Lemba who provided the equally unique stonework seen here at Great Zimbabwe.
They've only been prestige.
Whoever built this place, it was a real feat of engineering. These walls are solid granite, not soft sandstone.
You said that there were 15 million stones put in this wall?
Yes, this was a big job.
How could they have found or quarried so much stone?
I can show you one of the quarries, which is not very far from Great Zimbabwe.
Edward has taken me onto one of the hills around Great Zimbabwe. They're made of granite sheets, smooth and slightly curved like an onion skin.
What are these guys doing?
They are preparing the rock for building the stone walls. As you can see, they have to choose a suitable site. This is characteristic of the rock, that it breaks in parallel sheets, and that's where you make your fire.
So you build a fire on top of the rock, and then it, what, cracks?
It cracks.
Ah.
Yeah.
And this is the traditional technique?
That's how they were doing it in Zimbabwean times.
So we'll make a fire. I just need a little bit more straw. Start that fire.
It's hard to believe that just by lighting a fire on this huge rock, you can split it.
Don't split.
Good, split. Good.
They say the process should take several hours. We'll see.
Gotta keep stoking the fire. Fire! That looks good. That's actually right on top of the fracture.
Yeah.
So that's good, right?
Yeah.
So once it starts cracking, we just kind of watch it go all the way along the way.
Yes. And then you have to push the fire this side. Remove.
I heard that. I heard that. You hear that?
Yeah. This pop explosion.
The rock's starting to crack. You can hear it before it starts to go. There's the crinkling, the crackling of the fire, and then below it, you can hear the rocks kind of going ding, 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 ding. It's going down there, so it just went all the way down there. You can't see it, we have to move the fire, but it looks like it runs all the way down here to the end. Hey, that's a little hot. You don't have any eyebrows left. Yeah. Now I see we're using metal tools. Would the Shona have had metal tools?
No, except for iron hammers.
Iron, so they had iron.
Iron hammers.
But the hammers were probably used to break the rock.
Yes.
More than
this kind of thing, they would use wooden rakes.
Wooden rakes to move everything.
Move everything.
And then the iron hammers would be used to break the rock later.
Break the rocks and then trim them. That's it. A perfect one. Again.
That's a perfect one?
Yeah.
I made this one.
The building blocks for the great enclosure were basically made in this way.
So all of the building blocks for the stonework that we saw
yes.
is made this way.
I can see now where the building blocks for Great Zimbabwe came from. But I still haven't gotten to the bottom of exactly who built it. Were the Lemba involved, as they claim?
They are an African people, just like the Shona. They are Shona speaking today.
So it's possible their claim may hold some weight, that they were here.
They were certainly here, but whether they built the stone walls or not,
yeah.
It's very difficult to substantiate. As I said, I mean the evidence that is available at the moment in terms of oral testimonies is vague.
Okay. Okay, well, but at least there's a possibility.
Great Zimbabwe certainly fits the description of the great stone cities the Lemba claim to have built, and Edward confirms that the Lemba were definitely here. Even today, they have communities not far from here. Amazingly, the Lemba who live here in Zimbabwe, just like those in South Africa, really do believe they're Hebrews, and the cities of stone they claim to have built do seem to support their oral traditions. But does this make them a lost tribe of Israel? Did the Lemba, like the lost tribes, actually leave Israel in the 8th century BC? Are the Lemba truly a lost tribe of Israel? If so, they would have also been victims of the Assyrian invasion of the northern kingdom. I've just learned there's some archaeological evidence found in the same Israelite cities which fell to the Assyrians all those years ago, and which could finally put this question to rest. I want to see this site for myself, so I'm going back to the Holy Land.
I'm now in Israel, just a few miles north of Jerusalem. I'm on my way to Shomron, which in English is Samaria. During the time of the Northern Kingdom, Samaria was its capital, and there was a lot of fighting going on. 2,700 years later, there still is. This place is a war zone right in the middle of the West Bank, or occupied territories. So I've had to take a few extra precautions to get there. This is Yitzchak. Shalom. And this is my armored truck to get there. It's 2 inches of solid steel.
Yes.
Solid steel. And the windows?
Also 2 inches.
2 inches bulletproof glass. I'm hoping we won't need to use it, but again, we've taken every precaution because this place is not secure. Yalla?
We're trying to get to an archaeological site called Sebastia. It may hold vital clues about how the Lemba's epic journey began. But it's on the other side of a heavily guarded checkpoint. Will we be able to get in?
Now, in this section of this Lost Tribe documentary, once again, we saw the ancient Hebrews of the tribe of Lemba. And this heathen, this Khazar adventurer from the History Channel, is tracing their 4,000-mile journey from Israel through Yemen down to South Africa, where they've been for centuries. They showed black Hebrews and showed the stone cities that they built while wandering down to South Africa. You had archaeological professors from the university in South Africa who confess that the great Zimbabwe and these stone cities were built by the Lemba. Archaeological proof. Now they showed native Hamites sitting by the side of the road selling trinkets. You know, over there, one United States dollar is 6,000 Hamite dollars. Show you how poor they is. If they still that poor and backwards today, we know they didn't build those walls centuries ago that's still standing. If y'all agree with that, put a 7 up in her. We built pyramids and treasure cities in African Egypt out of stone. So why was they amazed at the great stone city that the Hebrews built as they journeyed through South Africa? They showed the ancient Todah Rabbah. They showed the ancient rock-breaking techniques using fire to crack the solid rock, to make the stones that they used to build the great stone cities and walls and towers. Now the native Hamite guide, he didn't want to admit that these wandering black Hebrews from Israel built this great stone city that Zimbabwe still cherishes to this day. But we know what the lick is. We know what the business is. Then we seen our Cazo adventurer say he needs more answers, so he travels back to our homeland of Israel to go over to Samaria, the ancient capital of the northern 10 tribes. And just like the Assyrians and the 10 tribes was warned when the northern kingdom fell, it was conflict. There's still conflict in the land of Samaria in the north to this day. Did you see the armor-plated vehicle with bulletproof glass these Edomites got to ride in just to roll down the road in Samaria? Because it's Arabs over there who will kill any and all of these identity thieves that they can lay their hands on over there in Samaria. Let's continue our documentary on the so-called lost tribe or the Lembas, because we're going to identify what tribe they are.
I'm on the trail of the Lemba, an African tribe who now live in South Africa, but claim to have made an epic 4,000-mile journey from Israel to get there. I've heard they were involved in the building of Great Zimbabwe, as well as similar stone cities elsewhere in South Africa. Now, I've returned to Israel, where they claim to have originated, to pick up their trail. If the Lemba are a lost tribe, they must have been present when ancient Israel split into the southern kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel. This was also the time that their neighbor, the mighty Assyrian Empire, was building in strength. For a while, the Assyrians tolerated the northern kingdom, but the 10 northern tribes were living on borrowed time. I've returned to Israel to visit the remains of one of the northern kingdom cities. Trouble is, just as it was 2,700 years ago, this area is still a war zone.
I want to show you where we're headed. On the top of this hill is Sebastia. There's an archaeological site there that's important to understand the Lemba's story. The problem is Sebastia is in the occupied territory. And there's a military checkpoint just over here. So the big question is, will they let us through so that I can gain access to the site?
But this isn't your average road trip. We've had to rent an armored truck to take us deep into a war zone. Itzhak, my driver, is an Israeli settler, and for him, this level of danger is just everyday life.
Itzhak, you live in a settlement?
Yes, of course.
How long have you lived there?
25 years.
Should I be concerned that I'm going into the occupied territory?
I cannot promise you that nothing not happen to you.
Right. Can't promise. No promises. I could get shot.
Everybody can shot.
Everyone gets shot. Where I come from, everyone doesn't get shot. Everyone goes to the mall, watches TV, and gets fat.
The Israeli settlers live alongside Palestinian communities, but only with massive military protection.
Definitely looks like a war zone. Good looking tanks.
2,700 years ago, it was just as tense. That's when the Assyrian Empire bore down on what is now the West Bank. The Bible tells us what happened in the second book of Kings, chapter 17. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land, and went up to Samaria, and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria, and carried Israel away. This is where they remained in exile. We're now approaching the checkpoint. We've been working on gaining access to the Sebastia site for weeks, and yesterday we finally got permission. But we were warned that if there's even the smallest bit of trouble in the occupied territories, we won't be allowed to the site.
See those tanks? This door weighs like 1,000 pounds. Wow, okay. אתה מדבר אנגלית? So I want to go to Sebastia, the archaeological site. Archaeological site. Yeah, is there an officer? We have with the History Channel. אי אפשר להיכנס כאן. יש, how do you say permission? You know the word permission? יש לנו permission. It's my horrible Hebrew, you know, I forget all. When he has a rifle, you tend to forget all the words. It's dangerous? Really? Here's what's going on. It's a producer, an associate producer talking to the guard. He refuses to let us in. We've been working on this for weeks, and yesterday it was fine, but they're saying that today, because of a recent uprising, they won't let us through the security gate.
Despite our best efforts, Sebastia is a bust. Fortunately, I have a backup plan. There's another ancient city which fell to the Assyrians, a place where the lost tribe story may have begun, and where the Lemba might have started their journey.
It's called Megiddo, but you might know it by its other name, Armageddon.
Megiddo appears in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament the same location is called Armageddon, the place where the book of Revelation claims the final battle between good and evil will be fought. Today, it's an important archaeological site, but in the 8th century BC, this place was a battlefield.
Trade items that the Egyptians were interested in.
Archaeologist Israel Finkelstein is director of the Megiddo expedition and an expert on the ancient kingdoms of Israel. He's agreed to tell me more about this site and the city of Megiddo's extensive influence.
Well, it was quite a big state. It was the most prosperous state in the Levant at that time. They reached all the way, I mean, you can hear about them from the information given to you by their neighbors. So the king of Moab is complaining. Well, the king of Damascus is complaining that they took territory from him in the north. The king of Assyria, the great king of Assyria, is saying that King Ahab of the northern kingdom came to fight, you know, at Karkar against the Assyrians with a huge army of chariots. So according to all this, they were very powerful in the 9th century.
So at this location, these people, they said there was about 1,000 people living here.
Something like that.
They were able to become significantly powerful so that the Assyrians, who were a powerhouse of their own, actually respected them.
Yes, no doubt about that. In the beginning, before Assyria became, so to speak, a devouring empire, in the beginning there was some sort of relationship between Assyria and the northern kingdom, and at a certain period of time, even the northern kingdom was an ally of the Assyrians. I mean, of course, a weaker ally, but still an ally under the sphere of influence of Assyria. But then, in the second half of the 8th century, things changed, and the Assyrians were interested in simply ruling over those territories and taking them over.
Eventually, the Assyrians' patience ran out, and they would no longer tolerate challenges to their power. They had set their sights on empire. The Assyrians' advance was swift and decisive as city after city of the Israeli kingdom fell to their mighty army. The Bible called Assyria a land bathed in blood. Israel Finkelstein believes that when the Assyrians conquered this land, they wiped out all the leadership of the tribes of Israel. The population was either killed or assimilated into other parts of the Assyrian Empire. He doesn't believe they could be found today.
This, you were saying, was the building that the Assyrians built once they took over this area.
Yes, this is one of the 2 palaces that the Assyrians built here.
What happens then to the rulers of the northern kingdom when the Assyrians come in and take over?
The rulers were deported. We don't know whether all of them, part of them, most of them, many of them. We don't have this kind of information, neither from the Bible nor from the Assyrian text, and of course not from archaeology. Archaeology cannot speak about a person. But most of this population probably assimilated in Mesopotamia.
So the people who are on a quest to find the lost tribes and to recover them and bring them back to Israel, they would only have to travel as far as Mesopotamia?
I don't think that you can travel anywhere and look for the lost tribes. I mean, this, I make a distinction between what we know from archaeology, history, and so on, and all sorts of popular ideas of going this way or that way and finding a lost tribe. There's no need whatsoever to go around the world, in my opinion, and look for lost tribes.
Fair enough. But the archaeology here says that the people did leave.
The people did leave, the people did die, the people, some of them were deported to Mesopotamia, some of them continue to live here.
Okay. Well, that's valuable. And seeing this certainly brings to me a sense of what community existed in the northern kingdoms.
To me too.
Israel Finkelstein tells me that Assyrian rule lasted for almost 100 years, that they went to great lengths to split up ethnic groups and cultures. So if it's true that none of the 10 lost tribes could have possibly survived intact, where does this leave the Lemba? I've certainly seen some evidence that they did make at least part of the journey they claim, but I can't prove a link to the Holy Land. There seems to be no trace of them left here at all. But there's one piece of evidence the Assyrians couldn't destroy. If the Lemba's claim is true, the proof should be in their blood. It's now possible to trace the Lemba's ancestry through their DNA, and that's just what scientists in South Africa have done. I'm going back to the Lemba's current homeland to find out the truth behind this fascinating mystery.
Doctor?
Let's discuss this section we just seen. Back in Israel over in Samaria, where he had to travel in an armored truck, they got stopped at a military checkpoint. Then he runs back into this Khazar, so-called expert on the 10 tribes, who reiterated, there ain't no need to go looking for no lost tribes. You ain't gonna find them. So, wouldn't the identity thief who claims to be of the people that this adventurer is looking for, wouldn't it be in his best interest to claim they can't never be found? Because if they're found and don't look nothing like them, somebody's lying. If y'all understand that, put a 77 up in her. This is why this so-called expert on the lost tribes gave the Khazar point of view that no, they lost and gone and ain't gonna never be found. But we know better. Why? What he just said. He went back to South Africa because now we can run DNA tests. Let's check the blood. Let's continue with the final 8 minutes of this outstanding documentary on our brothers, fellow Hebrew Israelites from the Northern Kingdom on the History Channel.
I've returned to South Africa, the current home of the Lemba, an African tribe who call themselves original Hebrews. We've traced the journey they claim to have made across the whole continent of Africa. I've seen evidence the Lemba were traders and craftsmen, and that they helped build great stone cities in Zimbabwe and South Africa. But it's proven very difficult to locate any evidence linking the Lemba to the famous lost tribes of Israel. But I'm not finished yet. In fact, there could still be solid proof behind their claim to Jewish ancestry. That's why I've come to Johannesburg. The scientists here at the National Health Laboratory Services have screened the genetic profiles of the Lemba and their neighboring tribes, the Venda and the Bantu. They've come up with some revealing conclusions.
I heard of the Lemba many years ago.
Dr. Trevor Jenkins has been the lead geneticist in the study of the Lemba for the last 20 years.
And I didn't really have much interest in pursuing their actual identity until a friend who had been studying the Lemba had detected some Jewish influences in the music of the Lemba.
So their music actually differs from the people around them. And that brought you in to study the genetics?
Yes.
So the genetic data doesn't say that the Lemba are Jewish as much as it says they have Semitic origins.
Yes, that's how we put it. What we were saying was that there's a non-African contribution to the gene pool of the Lemba, which is not evident in the peoples amongst whom they live in that part of the world.
You mentioned non-African influences. If someone didn't have genetic data or the testing available, how could you determine if one group is Jewish or not?
I distrust relying on morphological features to categorize populations.
So someone couldn't say, oh, he looks Jewish, she looks Jewish, he's not Jewish, she's not Jewish. That wouldn't have any bearing on the issue of Semitic origins.
I don't think so. The Lemba...
Dr. Jenkins believes DNA always trumps appearances, and the Lemba's claim to Jewish ancestry may indeed have some genetic support. Not only is their DNA very different from their neighbors, but according to his colleague, Dr. Himla Sudyal, it may have a non-African, even Jewish connection.
I'm Josh.
Good to see you.
Yes.
Take a seat. Sorry, I
great.
have gloves on, so I prefer not to shake your hand.
That's fine. Thank you. So I've come back to Johannesburg for more information about the Lemba, and I'm curious if you could tell me about the research you're doing.
Yes, this is the very interesting thing, that the South African Lemba harbor a particular Y chromosome pattern or lineage that's common in people who identify as the Kohanim or the Jewish priests.
Okay.
In the Jewish tradition, the Kohanim are part of the priestly caste. Amazingly, scientists have isolated a strand of DNA that's strongly associated with the Kohanim. It's called the Kohen modal haplotype, and it's almost exclusive to Jews who claim the priestly heritage. Almost exclusive. The Kohen modal haplotype has been found among the priestly caste of the Lemba.
The observation that the Cohen pattern was commonest in that one particular group is something that begs exploration.
This link supports the Lemba's oral history and the archaeological clues we've seen in the places they say they lived.
Hardcore time.
But Himla is quick to point out the limitations of genetic science.
Now, in terms of whether the Lemba are Jewish because they have the Cohen modal haplotype or not, is something that science cannot address. Because cultural identity is a social construct. No genetic data is going to tell you that you are Jewish, or that you are Hindu, or that you are Christian, or any religious domination.
Himla tells me that the presence of the Kohen modal haplotype can't tell us anything about the Lemba's religion. Yet just as remarkably, it can tell us where their ancestors came from, and it's not in Africa.
There is this interesting genetic information showing us that some of the original founders did come from other parts of the world, other than Africa. From our data, I would put my money on saying it's the Middle East.
Himla is convinced that Lemba ancestors did indeed come from the Middle East. I'm excited to get back to the Lemba to see what they make of this. And I've got the perfect opportunity. It's the Lemba's annual festival, and I've been invited. It's hard to believe that these people, who to the casual observer look just like the other African communities they live among, actually do have DNA passed down from Middle Eastern forefathers. This proves that when it comes to race, looks really can be deceiving. This annual festival is a chance for the oral history and traditional songs of the Lemba to be passed on to the next generation. This song tells the story of the Lemba's journey all the way from Israel to South Africa. Having traced this journey, I'm eager to hear what Samuel Moeti thinks about the DNA evidence.
So the genetic testing actually proved to the doubters what you and your forefathers have been saying for generations. That must be exciting news.
It is.
I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of the Lemba. I knew very little about the people. But having spent time making the journey from Jerusalem down through Zimbabwe, having spent time here at this festival, seeing what your people are all about, I can only sum it up in one word, and that's shalom.
Shalom.
We've seen how science has backed up the claims of the Lemba in the face of years of doubt and prejudice. The archaeological clues, the DNA evidence, and the Lemba's own oral history add up to a very convincing argument.
One of the most challenging aspects to doing this journey and seeing what it was like for the Lemba to go from the northern parts of Israel down into South Africa is that there's very little archaeological evidence on the ground that says definitively this is what the Lemba did. So this is why I think the genetic component is so compelling, because it's hard to fake the DNA. It's in your blood.
It reminds me that first impressions can often be misleading. It was hard to believe that a tribe of black Africans could be the descendants of ancient Israelites. But that's exactly what they appear to be.
Brothers and sisters, they are there. We are not lost. We are scattered. We are original Hebrew.
Y'all heard that elder tell him? That elder told him, we are not lost. We are scattered. We are original Hebrew. Now in this final section, our Zar'a explorer recaps his journey on the Lemba. Then he went off down to South Africa to do some DNA testing. Now the leading geneticists say that they have the Cohen Y chromosome gene. What do they test it against? There are many of our ancestors whose bones still lay in the land of Israel. You extract that DNA from those ancient bones with the blood of the living people. And through DNA testing, you get a match. Can you imagine how they had to swallow hard and admit that these black Hebrews who've been telling them for 2,700 years who they are, that they are Israelites, true bloodline descendants? Geneticists say they have the Cohen gene of the priesthood, which would be the Levites. Could the Lemba be the tribe of Levi? The tribe of the Hebrew priests? Their DNA ain't like the surrounding Hamitic native African people all around them. Though they are black like the South Africans around them, they are a clearly distinct and different people who know that they are Hebrews. The original Hebrews. You heard the Lemba spokesman and an Edomite explorer say Shalom and Todah Rabbah to each other. Just like we say Shalom and Todah Rabbah to each other. You can't fake DNA, you Israelites. If y'all understand that, put a 777 up in her. Now, one thing they won't admit on film is not one of those Khazars who claim to be Jews DNA match up with the bones of our ancestors. Hell, Arthur Koestler admitted in the book The 13th Tribe that they ain't got a drop of the blood of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in them. Todah Rabbah. You can't fake DNA. A tribe of black Africans are ancient Israelites. And we all heard the Levite elder say, we are not lost. We are scattered. We are original Hebrew. As they kept a holy high feast day that this Khazar explorer attended. And in the end, the Khazar explorer admitted these are direct descendants from one of the so-called 10 lost tribes of Yisrael. If y'all got a good understanding of the content of what you've seen and heard and are ready to move on in this lesson, put a 100 up in her for your brother Jacob. Please. Hallelujah. Now let's take a look at another one of the so-called lost 10 tribes. They're not lost. They scattered. Just as the manuscript said it would be. Let's go back and look at some 1961 vintage rare film of one of the lost 10 tribes. And see what some of them are today.
These villagers in the Simeon Mountains of the Gondar region of Ethiopia call themselves Beta Israel, the House of Israel. They are the black Jews of Ethiopia and trace their lineage to the earliest days of the Bible. When James Bruce, the 18th century Scottish explorer, encountered them for the first time, he wrote, "These are the ancient inhabitants of the mountains, who still preserve the manners and language of their ancestors. They are the only potters and masons of Abyssinia, and in this they excel greatly, and in general live better than the other Abyssinians, which in their revenge attribute to a skill in magic." To this day, the Ethiopian Jews are reputed by their superstitious neighbors to possess supernatural powers. In Ethiopia and much of Africa, smithing is associated with sorcery. The Falashas, as the chief practitioners of this craft, are viewed suspiciously by other Ethiopians, who fear the Falashas can cast an evil eye or Buddha upon them. After the Ethiopian Jews lost their independence in a series of wars in the 16th and 17th centuries, they were banned from owning land and branded Falasha, or outcasts. Since that time, the Ethiopian Jews have relied on their skills as metal workers, weavers, and potters for their economic survival. How the Falashas acquired their metallurgical expertise is not really known. Possibly they learned from Yemenite Jews who crossed the narrow straits of the Red Sea to trade and live in early Ethiopia. Living in isolation for centuries, the Falashas thought they were the only surviving Jews in the world. Jacques Beitlevich was among the first European Jews to work for the preservation of the Falashas. Deeply impressed with their devotion to Judaism, he wrote, "They adore a God of life, of righteousness and justice. Always in their thoughts, he inspires them with hope in a future of universal peace and harmony. In praying, they raise their souls to the infinite. They ask God to make Zion resplendent and to bring them back to Israel, their cherished country." The Keses are the Ethiopian Jewish holy men. They take the responsibility for preserving and transmitting the law and traditions of the people from generation to generation. When the famous Jewish scholar Halevi made his epic journey to Ethiopia in the 1860s, he was astounded to find that the Ethiopian Jews had maintained the Jewish lunar calendar precisely throughout the centuries, and that their religious observances coincided exactly with the religious holidays held by Jews around the world. In fact, he discovered an ancient Jewish people strictly observing the tenets of the Torah, the bedrock of the Jewish faith. The people prayed in Ge'ez, an ancient Semitic language now almost extinct, and today only used in religious services. In this rare film clip, the Keses are leading the people in the observance of the Seged, a Jewish Ethiopian holiday that commemorates the works of Ezra, the scribe priest who read the law to the Jews after the end of the first exile. Ezra admonished the Jews to obey and understand the laws of Moses faithfully. Ethiopian Jews believe that angels accompany man into the hereafter. The angel of light records man's good deeds, the angel of darkness his bad ones. The Ethiopian Jews highly revere Moses and have developed their own remarkable liturgical work called The Death of Moses, which is read during funeral services. The greatest bond between God and man in Ethiopian Jewish thought is the Sabbath. Its observance is considered the delineation between good and evil, between heaven and hell. The Keses themselves hold various opinions on just how and when Jews first came to Ethiopia. Central to the psyche of all Ethiopians is the Solomon and Sheba cycle. In the Bible, first in Kings and then in Chronicles, the account of Sheba's pilgrimage to Jerusalem unfolds. The Ethiopian version of the biblical story embellishes the narrative and asserts that Sheba, having heard of Solomon's great wisdom, is summoned to Jerusalem via the king's supernatural powers. Sheba came to Jerusalem bearing immense riches, 600 camels laden with gold, spices, and precious woods. Sheba opened her mind to Solomon and tested him with difficult questions. Solomon answered all her inquiries, and smitten by Sheba's beauty, he seduced the virgin queen with the use of a silver chalice. When Sheba departed for Ethiopia, Solomon presented her with a perfect pearl. Upon Sheba's arrival in Ethiopia, she gave birth to Menelik, son of Solomon, king of Israel, and Sheba, queen of Ethiopia. When Menelik came of age, he journeyed to Israel to seek out his father. Upon his arrival, he was warmly greeted by his father, the king. Ethiopian tradition states that Menelik was the favorite son of Solomon and was driven back to Ethiopia by his jealous half-brothers. When Menelik left for Ethiopia, Solomon presented him with a copy of the Ark of the Covenant. Menelik switched the original for a copy, and accompanied by an Israelite army and a contingent of priests, he established Judaism as the official religion of Ethiopia and modeled his rule upon Solomon's in Jerusalem. Another account of Ethiopian Jewry's genesis begins in the cataclysmic days of the prophet Jeremiah during the last years of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. Jeremiah warned the people that they would be scattered like straws that passed in the desert if they did not renounce their ungodly ways. King Zedekiah ignored Jeremiah's warning to not resist the strength of Babylon. Jeremiah was placed in a pit and left to die at the king's order. Ironically, Jeremiah was saved by the king's Ethiopian retainer, Ebed-melech. King Zedekiah mounted his ill-advised revolt against Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar himself led the Babylonian army that sacked Jerusalem and took the Jews into exile. The Bible tells us that all the nobles, blacksmiths, and metalworkers, 10,000 people in all, were led off from Jerusalem, and that only the poorest people were left behind. Further, the Babylonians despoiled the temple and killed the high priests, Zar'a and Zephaniah. King Zedekiah was blinded and put in chains, and in that way Judah was deported from its land. And there, by the rivers of Babylon, the people wept when they remembered Zion. The Bible further speaks of the poor Jews that were left behind in Judah. Many of them fled to Egypt. It is thought that some of these Jews continued their journey far down the reaches of the Nile, where they came to the island of Elephantine, to a place called the City of Ivories. It is documented in the Elephantine papyri that the Jews developed a remarkable trading relationship with the land of Ethiopia. Using the Nile as a highway, war elephants, ivory, spices, and gold passed through Elephantine on the way north to Alexandria and the Mediterranean. The Elephantine Jews grew rich and powerful. They built the first temple outside of Jerusalem and formed a militia known as the Jewish Force, which was charged with protecting Egypt's southern frontier. Elephantine was also the sacred island of the Egyptian deity Canub, whose sacred beast was the ox. But when the Jews persisted in sacrificing these animals during their rituals, in revenge the Egyptian priests, in league with the Persian commander of the city, destroyed the Jewish temple in 411 BC. After the decline of Elephantine, it is theorized that the Jewish community followed the well-known trade route down the Blue Nile. A Falasha spiritual leader said in the 1860s that, "We came after Jeremiah. We came by Sennar, and from there to Axum." In the 9th century, Eldad Hadani, the fabled Jewish traveler, reported a powerful Jewish nation existed in Africa. He said the kingdom had been founded by the tribe of Dan. The kingdom was reportedly surrounded by the mystical Sambachan River, which rolled sand and stone during the week, but was surrounded by fire during the Sabbath. More likely, it is thought that once in Ethiopia, the Elephantine Jews mingled with the Ethiopian Igao people, thus introducing Judaism into Ethiopia. The Ethiopians had been worshiping a multitude of pagan gods, and the introduction of Jewish monotheism made a tremendous impact on the country's religious life. The people became well acquainted with the Jewish Bible, which later became the model for the Ethiopian Royal Chronicles, the Glory of Kings. Thus, the Ethiopian Jews became a hybrid of the Elephantine Jews and the African Agao people. They retain the military aspect of the Elephantine Jews and are thought to have come into the service of Axum. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church succeeded in converting the Aksumite royal family to Christianity in the 4th century. Prometheus, a shipwrecked Greek, is credited with winning over the emperor to the church. The Ethiopian Church is remarkable in its devotion to the Jewish laws of the Bible. The strict observance of the dietary laws, the practice of circumcision, and the keeping of the Sabbath are examples of the Jewish traditions it maintains. Ethiopian history generally acknowledges that Ethiopia was a Jewish country before its conversion to Christianity. For centuries, its royal dynasty traced its bloodline directly to King Solomon and his son Menelik, who had brought the true Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia from Jerusalem. Ethiopia itself is mentioned several times in the Bible. Moses journeyed there when as son of Pharaoh he subdued the Ethiopians. And Ebed-melech the Ethiopian saved Jeremiah from the pit. In the 15th century, Abba Sega, the son of an Ethiopian emperor, converted to Judaism and proceeded to reform Falasha ritual and prayer. He also introduced the Christian practice of monasticism. Jewish monks became a fixture of Falasha life and retained great influence over the Falashas into the beginning of the 20th century. The most important of the Ethiopian emperors was Caleb, who in the 6th century AD conquered the Jewish king of Arabia, Abu Duwas. With this victory, the area now known as Yemen came under Ethiopian control. This enabled Axum to control the lucrative Red Sea trade to India and the Orient, and to accumulate vast wealth. Another spoil of victory were the Yemenite Jews, expert metal workers and arms makers, who were carried off to Ethiopia by the victorious Caleb. Some historians theorize that in these Yemenite Jewish prisoners are to be found the true origins of Ethiopian Jewry. Meanwhile, the Judaized Agau were appointed by the Ethiopian emperors to protect the western borders of Ethiopia. This region controlled the trade routes to Egypt and the gold-producing area of Gojam. Later, chafing under the Aksumite kings and gaining strength from their strategic position, the Falashas rose up under the rule of a beautiful Jewish queen named Judith. Encouraged by...
Okay, that's the first part of these two parts we're going to see on the lost tribe out of Ethiopia. It opens up Ethiopia circa 1961 with the people who call themselves Beta Israel, the house of Israel, the black Hebrews of Ethiopia. These are ancient Israelites. Did you notice how the native Hamites, the native Ethiopians, say they had supernatural powers because they were skilled in crafts and working with metals? And the Most High is with this so-called lost tribe. You will see why. During the 16th and 17th century, they were branded Falasha, which means outcast. Because Hebrews have to keep in mind, wherever we sojourned at, we was not welcomed. These people knew who we are. Know that we're the Most High's chosen people. And those twin evils of envy and jealousy often sprang up amongst the people who we dwelt with in these foreign lands. So in the 16th and 17th century, they were branded as Falasha, outcasts, by the Hamite Ethiopians. They lived in isolation for centuries. So much so that they thought they were the last surviving tribe of Israel on the face of the earth. In 1860, a Khazar named Halevi sought out the black Hebrews dwelling in Ethiopia, who were keeping the Torah of the Most High Yah, the dietary laws, keeping the Shabbat and the feast days, as all the 12 tribes of Israel are commanded to follow the laws given unto Moses at Mount Sinai. From generation to generation, they have always known they are Israelites and have kept the Shabbat for over 2,000 years since their exile from the promised land. These heathens in this short documentary gave the oral history of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon, who loved many women, which led to his downfall. Sheba and Solomon had a son whose name was Menelik. Menelik went and saw his daddy in Jerusalem when he got of age, and with a Hebrew Israelite army guard, he went back to his kingdom in Ethiopia and modeled it after his daddy's Israelite kingdom. Then the oral history of the exile caused by the Babylonians and Nebuchadnezzar and the deportation of Judah was given, and how the dispersed Hebrews left behind began to wander into neighboring Africa, starting in Egypt, which borders Israel to this day. In the 9th century, a Khazar-Kite traveler, Eldad Hadani, reported that the powerful tribe of Dan had been discovered living in Africa and Ethiopia. They showed the ancient manuscript, the Holy Bible, that they always had. They showed the Church of the Tablet. What tablet? The Ark of the Covenant that contains the stone tablets that the Torah was written on and given to Moses at Mount Sinai. That's what tablet. They keep the Hebrew traditions of our fathers and speak of the Ark of the Covenant that was brought to Ethiopia. Like the other tribes scattered throughout the diaspora, they began to use and do things they should not have, like trying to become Christians and using the hexagram, falling into some of the same bad habits that even a tribe of Judah done fell into in the land of our sojourning down here in modern-day Babylon. Let's continue with part 2 of this expose on the ancient black Hebrews of Ethiopia that the world calls the philosophy.
Encouraged by the defeat of Coptic Egypt by the forces of Islam and aware of Axum's own weakened state, Judith's army entered and destroyed the city of Axum. An ancient Ethiopian manuscript gives this account of her victory. First, she destroyed the palace and church built by Abraha. Then the stelae, which were constructed by the Greek craftsmen, were broken by her hammers. Judith ruled for 40 years. In the wake of Judith's rule, a new Jewish dynasty called Zar'a took the reins of Ethiopia's power in the 10th century A.D. The explorer James Bruce wrote that the first 5 Zagwan kings were Jewish. They traced their nobility directly to Moses and his Ethiopian wife. After the Zar'a relinquished control of the throne to their Christian relations, the Jewish Ethiopians maintained their own independent kingdom in the Ethiopian highlands. Not until the 16th century did the Falashas begin to lose their hard-won independence. The Christian Ethiopian kings, fortified with Portuguese firearms and infused with the murderous spirit of the Inquisition brought by Jesuit missionaries, began to overwhelm the Jews. In a last terrifying battle, the Jewish King Gideon chose death rather than to submit to baptism. Eventually, a backlash against the Jesuits, led by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, saw to the execution and banishment of the Portuguese missionaries who almost succeeded in destroying both the Jews and the native Ethiopian church. Regardless, the Falashas received a crippling blow to their economic and political independence, a blow from which they would never recover. By the time James Bruce arrived in the late 1700s, the Jewish population had declined to less than 500,000 people. With the accession of King Theodore to the throne in the mid-1800s, Ethiopia gained its greatest ruler since Caleb. Theodore subdued his rivals and united the country under his strong centralized rule. The Ethiopian Jews saw Theodore's success as a prelude to the coming of the Messiah, and led by some of their religious leaders, they attempted to emigrate to Palestine, decades before the birth of Zionism in Europe. Sadly, their dream ended in disease and starvation. Also during Theodore's reign, Henry Stern and other Protestant missionaries based in London devoted themselves to converting Ethiopia's Jews to Christianity. Stern told the Falashas that Judaism was a dead religion and the Jews of the world had accepted Christianity. Stern was eventually imprisoned by Theodore when he gravely insulted the emperor during a royal audience. A British army was sent to rescue Stern and his fellow missionaries. General Napier led the English expeditionary army that defeated Theodore at the Battle of Magdala, where Theodore took his own life rather than face the disgrace of capture. By the time Haile Selassie had gained the Ethiopian throne, pro-Falasha committees headed by Fetlovich had succeeded in establishing schools for the Falashas. Selassie, known as the Lion of Judah, was 225th successor to the Ethiopian crown. Across the Mediterranean, Benito Mussolini, fascist dictator of Italy, dreamed of restoring the Roman Empire to its former glory. Mussolini coveted Ethiopia's fertile plains and its position straddling the Red Sea. Enthusiastically supported by legions of black-shirted fascists, he launched an all-out invasion of Africa's only independent country. By 1939, over 200 planes, 10,000 military vehicles, and 200,000 men were dispatched to make Ethiopia the jewel of the Italian Empire in Africa. The Italians had invaded Ethiopia in the 1890s, only to be defeated in the Battle of Adawa. Now they returned with a vengeance, using the most modern of weapons. With their initial success, the invaders attempted to lure the Falashas and other tribal groups into collaborating against the dominant Amharic tribe. But the Falashas rallied to their country's defense, and as one observer wrote, Kushites, the dominant race, were to be seen drilling besides Falasha Jews, Galas, and Somalis. After Mussolini signed a 1938 treaty with Hitler, the Ethiopian Jews became a direct target of anti-Semitic propaganda. Ironically, this makes the Falashas the first Jews to take up arms against fascism, and the first Jews outside Germany and Italy to suffer directly from the hatred of Nazism. During the course of the war, the Ethiopian royal family went into exile, with Haile Selassie staying in Jerusalem before heading to London. Only after years of fighting with the Ethiopians, with the help of the British and a small contingent of Palestinian Jews, able to throw the Italian invasionary force from Ethiopia. The war seriously disrupted the fabric of Ethiopian Jewish life. In its aftermath, the people clung to their traditional crafts. But the combination of missionary work and economic exploitation over the decades had decimated the population. This woman is preparing some of the distinctive dark Ethiopian clay for pottery work. The Falasha women do not use the potter's wheel in their labors, and the items they produce are highly prized articles of Ethiopian life. The men operate handmade looms that weave cotton thread into cloth. These women are demonstrating the age-old technique of spinning cotton fiber into thread. The shama is the traditional garb of all Ethiopians. The closely knit Ethiopian Jewish community is strongly held together by the people's deep spiritual faith. Throughout the centuries, they have steadfastly defended the religion of their ancestors and have strictly observed the commandments of the Torah. The weekly Sabbath ceremony is a keystone of their religion, and the Falashas believe that nothing can vie in its importance to the human soul. Ethiopian Judaism has evolved greatly in the past 4 decades. The greatest innovation has been the introduction of Hebrew into Falasha society and ritual. The teaching of Hebrew is today banned in Ethiopia, and numerous Hebrew teachers have been tortured and killed for their efforts. These Kesses are chanting Laho Daudi, let us receive the Sabbath. The intonation is Ethiopian, but the words are in Hebrew. Another important theme in the prayers of the Falashas concerns the redemption of Israel. One prayer reads, "Do not separate me, O Lord, from the chosen, from the light, from the splendor. Let me see, O Lord, the light of Israel, and put me with thy people Israel." Now, in our time, countless centuries of prayer and supplication have been answered, for out of the ruins of the Holocaust, the event of the millennia took place.
October 1947. 2 shiploads of Jewish refugees from Europe attempt to land in Palestine, only to be turned away by the British and shipped to internment on Cyprus. In May of 1948, a new Jewish state, Israel, was born in a bath of blood. Jewish troops routed Arab forces from the city of Haifa in the first of a series of battles that were to reverberate through the years. In the year of independence, fighting was fierce in the Negev desert area. Here, Israeli troops routed the Arabs and took hundreds of prisoners. Meanwhile, on May 14, 1948, the new government, headed by David Ben-Gurion, is installed in Tel Aviv. Thus, for the first time since the Roman legion destroyed Jerusalem in the year 70 AD, the Jewish people have a nation of their own. Thus, history was made as the Jewish state of Israel was born. Conceived in strife and weaned on violence, Israel has flourished to become a constructive voice in world affairs. Her flag became a symbol of hope in a troubled world.
That day, the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal to the peoples. That day the Lord will raise his hand once more to ransom the remnant of his people, left over from the exile of Assyria, of Egypt, of Pathros, of Ethiopia. He will hoist a signal for the nations and assemble the outcasts of Israel. He will bring back the scattered people of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The Lord will have pity on Jacob. He will choose Israel once more and settle them in their own country. Thus says the Lord, at a favorable time I will answer you. On the day of salvation I will help you. I have formed you and appointed you a covenant of the people. I will say to the prisoners, come out. To those in darkness, show yourself. Yes, I am going to gather all Jacob together, like sheep in the fold, like a flock in its pasture. They will fear no man. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my supplicants will bring me offerings. I shall rescue them from wherever they have been scattered during the mist and darkness. I shall bring them out of the countries where they are. I will plant them in their own country, never to be rooted out again of the land. To you, daughter of Zion, the hopeful captives will return. And the gain of Ethiopia, men of stature, shall come unto you, and shall be yours.
Now, in this segment of the documentary on Beta Yisrael, they showed the persecution of the Danites in Ethiopia, who they tried to wipe them off the face of the earth in the 1700s. There were less than 500,000 black Hebrews left in Ethiopia. We saw King Theodore in the 1800s, who attempted to go back to the land of Israel, their homeland. But disease put an end to that. And the English attacked and destroyed King Theodore in Ethiopia. When Haile Selassie reigned, the black Hebrews were well known living in this kingdom. Here he was running around calling himself the Lion of the tribe of Judah. But them Danites were still living in abject poverty and straw and mud huts, weaving and using their metal skills to survive. amongst hostile native Hamites. We saw how the Roman Mussolini went after Africa's only independent country, Ethiopia, where the tribe of Dan had been dwelling for centuries. In 1939, Mussolini attacked and avenged the Romans' defeat in Ethiopia in the 1800s. And the black Hebrews fought against the Italian forces of Mussolini. Mussolini signed a pact in 1938 with Adolf Hitler. And Hitler's Nazis had an anti-Semitic propaganda campaign against the black Hebrews of Ethiopia, making them the first so-called Jews to suffer directly from the hatred of Nazism. Selassie got ran off to England by Mussolini and hid behind the Queen's skirt from the time of the fall of Hitler and Mussolini. The Danites of Ethiopia, of Beta Israel, they continued to live in primitive conditions going up into 1960 and 70 until Operation Moses and Operation Solomon. Secret airlifts took place, which brought these black Hebrews back into the promised land. We saw the film from 1961 in this black Hebrew village, how they, like their ancestors who lived in exile from the Holy Land, they also prayed to go back to Israel, just like the Lemba do down in South Africa, just like the Hebrews that are scattered throughout the diaspora do. Then they showed the Khazar-Kike invasion of our homeland, as the Khazar Edomites formed the new government of Israel in 1948 through the Balfour Declaration. And we saw the creation of a Jewish. That's like being blackish or whitish. Ain't no such thing as Jewish. You either got the blood of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in your veins, or you don't. You are either a Hebrew Israelite or you are not. If there's anybody in this room that agrees and understands with that, put a 100 up in her. Torah. In 48, we witnessed the creation of a Jewish state in our promised land. Then they showed some of our Hebrew brethren who have made it back to the land of Israel. They read prophecy towards the end of this part 2 of this documentary, while showing the true bloodline Hebrews back in the promised land, walking around were a portion of Beta Israel, the Hebrews out of Ethiopia, the Danites, who dwelt in Ethiopia for centuries, praying to return back to the land of Israel. They showed them back in Israel today. But alas, that's just 2 of the so-called 10 lost tribes. I got one more 10-minute video clip to show you, Israelites, showing y'all Hebrews who look like you and me, calling upon our Elohim to fulfill his promise concerning the prophecies of returning us back unto our land.
For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and parted my land.
It has been estimated that more than 100 million Africans were taken as slaves during the transatlantic slave trade. These so-called Jews had a huge role in the transatlantic slave trade. When Columbus sailed to the Americas, he was accompanied by 5 Marranos, modern Jews. Gabriel Sanchez, abetted by the other 4 Jews, sold Columbus on the idea of slavery. Once the early so-called Jews settled in America, they set up the Jewish Newport World Center of Slave Commerce. The slave industry took off. The so-called Jews owned the slave ships that shipped the Negro across the world. They even manned the ships. When the so-called Jews sailed to Africa, they discovered true Israelite Hebrews living in very large communities in Nigeria, Ghana, and other West African nations. What better way to steal a people's identity than to exploit them and sell them into captivity? Slavery.
In a way, Lieutenant, they are the ultimate victims of recent history. If you'll favor my comparison, they are the wandering Jews of Africa. Fleeing the Pharaoh Shaka, they are the wandering Jews of Africa. Fleeing the Pharaoh Shaka, they are the wandering Jews of Africa. Fleeing the Pharaoh Shaka into the Babylonian captivity of slavery.
To this day, several tribes still consider themselves descendant from the true Israelites of the Bible, including the Ibu of Nigeria, Tutsis of East Africa, the Bamalikis of Cameroon, African tribes in Ghana, Mali, Uganda, South Africa, and the Lemba tribe of Zimbabwe.
The Lemba tribe, very possibly one of the lost scattered tribes of Israel, are located in remote communities in the heart of Zimbabwe. It is estimated that there may be as many as 400,000 of these ancient descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Oral tradition claims that their ancestors fled the Holy Land over 2,500 years ago. We know from recent DNA testing that many are Kohanim, or descendants of Aaron, the priest, the brother of Moses. They observe many biblical Jewish customs, like the dietary laws, the blowing of shofars, and circumcision. Today they live in abject poverty. Most have never even seen a doctor or dentist.
From deep inside Africa, a sound is emanating that is causing reverberations around the world. A sound of the people casting off 2 centuries of colonialism, returning to what they say are their native roots.
I know from birth I'm a Jew. Only I know that my forefather missed the way.
I grew up alongside every other Igbo youth. We kept on hearing that Igbo people came from Israel.
There was a story my mom told me at the age of 6 years. I never forget. He said the Igbos are Jews.
And it's the story of one man, Shemuel, who went searching for what that meant and found answers on the internet, prompting a journey that led him to a community of thousands of Jews. A place where resources are few, but commitment transcends. Through prayer, practice, ritual, diet, and song. But this is also the sound of doubt from Jews in America.
They would ask me, are you from America? Or I said, no, I'm a Nigerian. They say, you black? I said, yes. They said, no, it's not true.
And rejection from family and friends.
I am like an outcast among them.
And in this volatile Christian-Muslim nation, doubt often turns to violence. This is the story of the Igbo, 25 million strong, a people once under siege by their very own government.
Biafra declared its independence.
And a people once captured and shipped across the Atlantic by the hundreds of thousands. A people who helped build America, and a people whose descendants are now discovering their Igbo roots, raising questions of cultural identity for countless African Americans.
Many African Americans actually do not know that they have Igbo heritage, the chances of them.
And just thinking about the hundreds of people, the thousands of people really, whose lives are going to be changed because of these Jewish people embracing Yeshua, coming to Yeshua as their Messiah, and being built up, being educated, being restored.
The tribe of Judah are the black Negroes that are shipped to North and South America, Haiti, Cuba, Mexico, Jamaica, Portugal, Spain, West Indies, and England. Even though the indigenous people of some of these areas were black, they were conquered by Europeans, and because of the mixing and mingling of the seed between European males and the black indigenous women, what you see today is essentially the creation of a third race.
When we were children, we were told that we have a motherland, and that motherland was Spain. However, we have discovered later in our lives that as a matter of fact, we have several motherlands. And one of the greatest motherlands of all is no doubt Africa. We love Africa. And every day we are much more aware of the roots we have in Africa. Also, America is our motherland. Africa, America, and Bolivar used to say that we are a new human race in Latin America, that we are not Europeans, nor Africans, or North Americans, that we are a mixture of all those races, and there is no doubt that Africa resounds with a pulse like 1,000 drums.
Many of the descendants of the Negroes shipped in slavery to these places are still there, and they are still black. However, the image is widely shown of Portuguese, Argentine people, Uruguayans, Mexicans, Cubans, Guatemalans, Panamanians, North American Indians, and Puerto Ricans are a mixed race of people, and many confuse them with the indigenous by claiming them to be as such and ignoring those of dark skin. The indigenous seed has been whited out and replaced with a lighter skinned mixed seed carbon copies of European father and a black indigenous mother. The other 11 tribes are still in Africa. Prophecy says that when the Messiah returns at the time of the Most High's wrath, he's going to gather his people, the other tribes, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, but Judah from the four corners of the earth.
Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord, to serve him with one consent. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. In that day shalt thou not be ashamed for all thy doings wherein thou hast transgressed against me. For then I will take away out of the midst of thee them that rejoice in thy pride, and thou shalt no more be haughty because of my holy mountain. I will also leave in the midst of thee an afflicted and poor people, and they shall trust in the name of the Lord. The remnant of Israel shall not do iniquity nor speak lies, neither shall a deceitful tongue be found in their mouth. For they shall feed and lie down, and none shall make them afraid. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. And it shall come to pass in that day, that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time, to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. But they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west. They shall spoil them of the east together. They shall lay their hand upon Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall obey them.
He's going to gather his people, the other tribes, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, but Judah from the four corners of the earth. Here is Ethiopia, and as you can see, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia would be in the direction of all the places where the Negro was captured. Beyond the rivers of Ethiopia is where they are. Ethiopia is Cush, the land of Cush. If you check the Hebrew word for Ethiopia, it's Cush. And if you look at the ancient map of Cush, it covers modern Sudan and Egypt. Look at the rivers of Cush. It's the Nile River that flows all the way from Egypt to modern Ethiopia. What's beyond the rivers of Cush? The inner parts of Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Cameroon, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, Zimbabwe, and South Africa.
Now we saw in this 12-minute clip the reading of Joel chapter 3 verses 1 and 2 and a history of the transatlantic slave trade, where the so-called Jews of the day ran the transatlantic slave trade and delivered the tribe of Judah into the captivity here in America. We saw that there are black Hebrews living in Mali, Nigeria, Ghana, Ethiopia, and other parts of Africa right now as we speak. If y'all saw that, put a 77 up in this room. Y'all clearly heard songs of Zion being sang. Y'all heard them saying, hallelujah, Lukalem. Y'all clearly heard them just as we do, giving up praise unto the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Torah. Once again, we saw the limbers looking like they was electric sliding in the dust over there in Zimbabwe. 400,000 strong. One of the so-called 10 lost tribes of Israel, who could very well be the Levites, the priestly tribe. For once again, their DNA test showed the Kohen chromosome of Aaron, Moses' brother, of the Levitical priesthood. They have maintained their heritage and identity through a 2,700-year oral tradition passed down from generation to generation, and have always prayed to return back to the promised land, the inheritance of the 12 tribes of Israel. They again showed the keeping of the dietary laws, and the blowing of the shofar horns, and the keeping of the high holy day of the Hebrews, as commanded by the Most High to the 12 tribes of Israel. We saw the black Hebrews living in Nigeria, where we saw one of the other so-called 10 lost tribes shouting hallelujah and singing songs of Zion just as we do, who also long to return home where the 12 tribes belong. These are what the heathens have labeled the Igbo Hebrews of Nigeria, but who could be Naphtali, Gad, or Asher of the so-called 10 lost tribes. We saw how one of these brothers, Shmuel, was rejected by the Khazars as being a black Jew, but who knows he has the true bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, just as we do, and who is part of the 12 tribes of Israel as we are. And we see how them Hebrews are still banging with the native Hamite Nigerians in the land that they sojourn in. You see them fighting? I know they Hebrews. They look like a Saturday night in St. Louis. Then we saw the Hebrews living in Ghana, who were keeping a Passover in 2013. Another of one of the so-called 10 lost tribes dwelling beyond the rivers of Ethiopia on the continent of Africa. Hebrews who look like you and me, you sons and daughters of Judah, who are our little brothers of the northern kingdom of Israel, whose capital was in Samaria in northern Israel. They broke down in this clip how the tribe of Judah was shipped to North and South America, but how the other tribes remain beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, right there on the continent of Africa. So let's say that Judah was dispersed throughout the islands of Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, the Dominican Republic. They showed there are still black Hebrews living in those lands. And even though they show the world that the Portuguese people look light-skinned, do y'all know some Portuguese who is dark as you and me? Do y'all know it's Cubans and Dominicans who is dark as you and me? And we ain't going to go by some made-up map out of New York by some brothers who thought they had a GPS system. We're going to go by the manuscript. For the manuscript said that the Most High would bring back his suppliants, those who pray unto him beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, being the other 11 tribes. And he would gather the outcasts of Judah from the four corners of the earth. One tribe was shipped out. And that's the tribe that we from. If you have understanding of this Zion, this Shabbat, put a hallelujah 1,000 up in her. For again I say, the world proclaims that these are lost tribes. But I tell you, they are not lost. They are scattered, as we are. Toda Rabbah. Continuing. They showed some of the Hebrews who are still scattered throughout Latin America, South America, Central America to this day. They go on to say that the other 11 tribes remain in Africa, fulfilling the prophecy that all the other tribes will be gathered beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. But that Judah from the four corners of the earth. For those of y'all who didn't understand, let's go to the book of Zephaniah, chapter 3, and read verses 1 through 20, so that a crystal clear understanding may be had from henceforth. Because I'm tired of these Hebrews setting up their fake kingdoms, making themselves potentates. Because I profess to you, ain't no man going to do this. It's going to be done by the Most High Yah, as it is written in Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 1 through 20. Well, excuse me. Yes, 1 through 20 we read. Woe to her that is filthy and polluted, to the oppressing city. She obeyed not the voice. She received not correction. She trusted not in the Most High Yah. She drew not near to her Elohim. Her princes within her are roaring lions. Her judges are evening wolves. They gnaw not the bones till the morrow. Her prophets are light and treacherous persons. Her priests have polluted the sanctuary. They have done violence to the law. The 12 tribes of Israel messed up. Our ancestors disobeyed the Most High, and that's why we had to be driven into captivity and driven out of the homeland. Continuing. Verse 5. The just Yahweh is in the midst thereof. He will not do iniquity. Every morning doth he bring his judgment to light. He faileth not, but the unjust knoweth no shame. I have cut off the nations. Their towers are desolate. I made their streets waste, that none passeth by. Their cities are destroyed, so that there is no man, that there is none inhabitant. I said, surely thou wilt fear me. Thou wilt receive instruction, so their dwelling should not be cut off. However, I punished them, but they rose early and corrupted all their doings. Verse 8. Therefore wait ye upon me, saith Yahweh, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my first anger. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. For then will I turn to the people of pure language, that they may all call upon the name of Yahweh, to serve him with one consent. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, those who make supplication and prayers unto me. You saw them. even the daughter of my dispersed shall bring my offering. In that day shalt thou not be ashamed for all thy doings, wherein thou hast transgressed against me. For then I will take away out of the midst of thee them that rejoice in thy pride, and thou shalt no more be haughty because of my holy mountain. I will also leave in the midst of thee an afflicted and poor people, and they shall trust in the name of Yahweh. Did you see some of them Hebrew tribes had never seen a dentist or a doctor in their life? The prophecies are being fulfilled before our very eyes. Continuing. Verse 13. The remnant of Israel shall not do iniquity, nor speak lies. Neither shall a deceitful tongue be found in their mouth. For they shall feed and lie down, and none shall make them afraid. Sing, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O Israel. Be glad and rejoice with all the heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. The Most High hath taken away thy judgments. He hath cast out thine enemy. The King of Israel, even Yahweh, is in the midst of thee. Thou shalt not see evil any more. In that day it shall be said to Jerusalem, fear thou not, and to Zion, let not thine hands be slack. Yahweh thy Elohim in the midst of thee is mighty. He will save. He will rejoice over thee with joy. He will rest in his love. He will joy over thee with singing. I will gather them that are sorrowful for the solemn assembly, who are of thee, to whom the reproach of it was a burden. Behold, at that time I will undo all that afflict thee, and I will save her that halteth, and gather her that was driven out. And I will get them praise and fame in every land where they have been put to shame. At that time will I bring you again, even in the time that I gather you, for I will make you a name and a praise among all the people of the earth, when I turn back your captivity before your eyes, saith Yahweh. Then we saw the prophecies out of the book of Isaiah. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 11 and read verses 10 through 16. Let's go to the book of the prophet. In Isaiah chapter 11, verses 10 through 16, we clearly read, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and its rest shall be glorious. That's our beloved Hamashiach, Yahushua, the Holy Lamb of Yahweh. Verse 11. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Most High shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Stop. He gonna gather one set of the tribes from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, but he gonna gather up Judah where they've been dispersed to the four corners of the earth. How you gonna get around that? You can't get around that. Verse 13. The envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. We not going to have no ancient beefs amongst the 12 tribes no more. Ain't going to be no more 10 tribes getting mad at 2 and running off and splitting up. All that is over. But they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west. They shall spoil them of the east together. They shall lay their hand upon Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall obey them. And Yah shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea. And with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the 7 streams, and make men go over dry shod. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, which be left from Assyria. That's those 10 lost tribes who went captives to the Assyrians. Like as it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt. Those 10 lost tribes going to walk over the river Nile. It's going to be dried up like the desert. And back into the land of promise. But I imagine they're going to confiscate a few SUVs and Mercedes-Benz is on their way. They're going to relieve the heathens of a few gold trinkets and diamonds on their way. Because we sure going to spoil them on our way back home. If y'all understood the scriptures we just read, put another hallelujah 1,000 up in her. For this is the promise from the Most High to those whom he punished for disobeying him, and made them sojourn as wanderers throughout the earth, especially the 4th tribe of Judah, who should have known better, being the most favored tribe, being a tribe that our Holy Messiah came out of. But our other 11 brothers are looking for Judah for leadership, just as they did in the days of our fathers. And they hear our voice, for our word goes forth. And we want our little brothers to know we ain't forgot about them. And then we saw a map of Africa, and how the so-called lost tribes were dispersed and scattered beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. But Judah to the 4 corners of the earth. The river of Cush is the Nile River that flows from Egypt all the way down to Ethiopia, as it does this day. And we saw that these Hebrews who are scattered in Africa are living in what is called beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, for it's in the interior of the continent of Africa. And when you look upon the Hebrews living in Mali and in Nigeria and in Cameroon and in Ghana and in Zimbabwe and various other places in Africa, you can clearly see They are the sons and daughters of our people and don't have the facial structure nor bloodline of the Hamite African nations that they dwell among. For they are not Hamites. They are Israelites of the 12 tribes of Israel. The daughters of Zion are beautiful, be they from Judah to Zebulun. For we descend from the same bloodline. But don't believe me. Let me show y'all what the heathen would call a coincidence that happened with your brother Jacob this week. Got an email from one of my little brothers who do the rapping, the 4 Tribe Static Addicts. He said, Jake, here go a new song we just did. See if it's video worthy and hook it up for us. So I'm in the midst of putting this lesson together. And I open it up on a plantation. And boy, you talk about a revelation. So what I did was I made a video of this jam. And it correlates with our lesson tonight. Because in this video are some of our brothers and sisters from the 10 lost tribes.
Rejoice, O ye nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants, and will render vengeance to his adversary, and will be merciful unto his land, and to his people.
We're the children of Israel. And if you read, you can tell the way we raise in hell. We're the children of Israel. Yeah, turn every big prophecy being fulfilled. We're the children of Israel. Holy Messiah coming back and every knee gon' bend. We're the children of God. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, y'all. Y'all gotta hear it. Yeah.
Look, folks tried my bloodline and seen the share my roots go deep. The line of Judah, let's wake on up. It's time for war, let's hit these streets. Keep the women and children at back. We was built for the attack. Fiery furnace, lion saying you take my life, God gave it back now. Now who want to bang with that? Can't take my life, he'll bring it back. No shame, I changed my name for that. Gave up everything I claimed for that now. Christ is to blame for that. I heard his word, it came to fact. The Father's word came to flesh, we blessed. Ain't no changing that. I go where the strangers at, the non-believers that hang in the back. I'ma itch that brain in the back. The truth would make that chain react. So lame brains a jack, but a spirit like me, I'm banging back. That righteous or that wicked for your soul. Don't play no games with that or else you shaming that. That God body, I'm claiming that. That out with the old, look in with the new, with the flesh don't rule. Who changing that? See your thoughts, no game in that. Freely walk with strings attached. Freely talk, no drains attached. Spiritual war, who's bringing back?
We're the children of Israel. If you read, you can tell the way we raise in hell. We're the children of Israel. Turn every big prophecy being fulfilled. We're the children of Israel.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Whoa. That's how we go. That's how we go. That's who we is. That's who we is.
The righteous side of the wicked rule on
the wickedness in hand is wrong. It's time again for the righteous to rule. The devil done led us to nuclear war. It's time to see what the righteous will do. Yeah, the plug, Christ to do. Truth I eat, I like it rude. Satan don't sleep, so why should you? Starve but you, his sights on you. Cash your pearls like dicers do. Be out of time like lifers do. Get it? Time like lifers do. Eternal life, I'm wifing you. Bend my knee, take stripes for you. Wolves, I bring that knife for you. You fleece the sheep, no life in you. I'm in your eyes while slicing you. Protect my king like knifers do. Fasting brings the brighter you. On your toes, the lighter you. Hunger brings the biter you. We organize like bikers do. We got balls like Rikers do. We strike like all pipers do. We gon' charge that Christ in you.
We're the children of Israel. If you read, you can tell the way we raise in hell. We're the children of Israel. Turn the children of Israel. Only Messiah coming back and every knee gon' bend. We're the children of Israel. You choose the righteous side, the wicked rule on in. Israel. And every knee gon' bend. Israel. Choose the righteous side, the wicked rule on in.
Now how can you look upon the dispersed of this people and not tell they are not from the same bloodline? Our brothers and sisters from the other tribes ain't lost. They scattered. Come on back up into the room, you Israelites. The daughters of Zion are beautiful, be they from Judah to Zebulun. I often say that if the Most High made a more beautiful woman than a Hebrew Israelite woman, he kept her up in heaven. But yet we still got Negroes running around her, chasing after these flatback wenches from the whores of Babylon. The heathen always parade his half-naked woman around, and there goes some Negro with his eyes bulging out of his head and slobbering about the lips and trembling like a possum in heat with lust, ready to commit the same abominations our forefathers did that got us threw up out the land. The world's best kept secret is our true identity, you Hebrews. But the prophecies of the dry bones is being fulfilled before our very eyes. Even by these very truths, you are witnessing this Shabbat in these last days. And know this of a surety: the Most High will keep his promise and return a remnant of each of the 12 tribes of Israel back into the promised land. Let's go to the book of Micah, chapter 2, verse 12. One verse. In the book of Micah, chapter 2, verse 12, we clearly read, Yah says this: I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all of thee. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together as the sheep of Bozrah, as the flock in the midst of their fold. They shall make great noise by reason of the multitude of men. And let me make this point. Yah will bring the 12 tribes out from among the people. No man shall do this. Get it straight. Ain't no punk buster bus driver gonna set up the kingdom of Yah down in no deserts, according to the prophecies of this book. The true and living Elohim of our fathers will do this by his hand. No man gonna be able to attach himself to the title of Hamashiach and accomplish this. All who try will fail, as we have witnessed. Now let's verify it in the manuscript. Let's go to the book of Ezekiel, the 34th chapter. Starting with verse 1. With all your getting, get you understanding. If you don't understood nothing that you've seen thus far this Shabbat, understand this chapter, ye children of Israel. We read, and the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say unto them, Thus saith Yahweh Elohim unto the shepherds, Woe be to the shepherds of Israel that do feed themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flocks? You eat the fat, and you clothe you with the wool. You kill them that are fed, but you feed not the flock. The diseased have you not strengthened, neither have you healed that which was sick, neither have you bound up that which was broken, neither have you brought again that which was driven away, neither have you sought that which was lost, but with force and with cruelty have you ruled them. And they were scattered, because there is no shepherd. And they became meat to all the beasts of the field when they were scattered. My sheep wandered through all the mountains and upon every high hill. Yeah, my flock was scattered upon all the face of the earth, and none did search or seek after them. Therefore, ye shepherds, hear the word of the Most High. As I live, saith Yahweh Elohim, surely because my flock became a prey, and my flock became meat to every beast of the field, because there was no shepherd, neither did my shepherds search for my flock, but the shepherds fed themselves and fed not my flock. Therefore, O ye shepherds, hear the word of Yahweh. Thus saith Yahweh Elohim, Behold, I am against the shepherds, and I will require my flock at their hand, and cause them to cease from feeding the flock. Neither shall the shepherds feed themselves any more. For I will deliver my flock from their mouth, that they may not be meat for them. For thus saith Yahweh Elohim, Behold, I, even I, will both search my sheep and seek them out. As a shepherd seeketh out his flock in the day that he is among his sheep that are scattered, so will I seek out my sheep, and will deliver them out of all places where they have been scattered in the cloudy and dark day. And I will bring them out from the people, and gather them from the countries, and will bring them to their own land, and feed them upon the mountains of Israel by the rivers, and in all the inhabited places of the country. I will feed them in a good pasture, and upon the high mountains of Israel shall their fold be. There shall they lie in a good fold, and in a fat pasture shall they feed upon the mountains of Israel. I will feed my flock, and I will cause them to lie down, saith Yahweh Elohim. I will seek that which was lost, and bring again that which was driven away, and will bind up that which was broken, and will strengthen that which was sick. But I will destroy the fat and the strong. I will feed them with judgment. And as for you, O my flock, thus saith Yahweh Elohim, behold, I judge between cattle and cattle, between the rams and the he-goats. Seemeth it a small thing unto you to have eaten up the good pasture? But you must tread down with your feet the residue of your pastures, and to have drunk of the deep waters. But you must foul the residue with your feet. And as for my flock, they eat that which you have trodden with your feet, and they drink that which you have fouled with your feet. Therefore thus saith Yahweh Elohim unto them, behold, I, even I, will judge between the fat cattle and between the lean cattle, because you have thrust with side and with shoulder, and pushed all the disease with your horns, till you have scattered them abroad. Therefore will I save my flock, and they shall no more be a prey. And I will judge between cattle and cattle, and I will set up one shepherd over them, and he shall feed them, even my servant David. He shall feed them, and he shall be their shepherd. And I, Yahweh, will be their El, and my servant David a prince among them. I, Yahweh, have spoken it, and I will make with them a covenant of peace, and will cause the evil beast to cease out of the land, and they shall dwell safely in the wilderness, and sleep in the woods. And I will make them and the places round about my hill a blessing, and I will cause the shower to come down in this season. There shall be showers of blessings, and the tree of the field shall yield her fruit, and the earth shall yield her increase, and they shall be safe in their land, and shall know that I am Yahweh, when I have broken the bands of their yoke, and delivered them out of the hand of those that serve themselves of them. And they shall no more be a prey to the heathen, neither shall the beasts of the land devour them, but they shall dwell safely, and none shall make them afraid. We ain't gonna have to ride around in Israel in bulletproof windows with armor-plated trucks. Verse 29, and I will rise up for them a plant of renown, and they shall be no more consumed with hunger in the land, neither bear the shame of the heathen any more. Thus shall they know that I, Yahweh, their Elohim, am with them, and that they, even the house of Israel, are my people, saith Yahweh Elohim. And ye my flock, the flock of my pasture, are men, and I am your El, saith Yahweh Elohim. Hallelujah. So there you have it. The ancient history of our people and the prophecies about to be fulfilled concerning the Most High's chosen people. the 12 tribes of Israel, black Hebrew Israelites who remain the bloodline descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to this day, and the inheritors of the Most High's promise. Let us pray for one another, Zion, that our Elohim is with us and will keep us until that glorious day when the saints will come marching in to Zion. 12 tribes strong. Hallelujah. That's our lesson. The 12 tribes of Israel.